Hi, everyone. So this is the Bialik Square in Tel Aviv. And the amazing thing is that the street and the square were named after Bialik while he was still alive, because he lived just behind my back at the moment. And hold on a second. I just want to turn down the volume because it's going to be distracting. So part of the video I filmed early in the morning, part of the video I filmed during the day, but it's one of those places where I feel at ease, and I filmed it last year. So this is the Bialik Square, one of the centers of the so-called modern Tel Aviv, like 15 minutes walk from the sea. And that's very close to the famous Neve Tzedek neighborhood where we've been many times together. This is the Museum of History of Tel Aviv, and the location is chosen not just by chance. And the building, the orange one, this is the library, and it's a study center and cultural center. Also has a nice cafe where people usually work with their laptops from sipping their iced coffee, cafe car or whatever, or iced cafe. And to me, it's still really weird because I see palm trees, and whenever a girl born in Siberia sees a palm tree, I feel like, okay, is this a resort? But then I remember, no, it's not a resort. This is the new, the kind of the old new Tel Aviv, because we have Jaffa, ancient city, ancient part of the city, which is also mentioned in the Old Testament. We know that. Done. We know that. And then in 1910s, Tel Aviv emerged. And Tel Aviv emerged thanks to the great number of immigrants, Jewish immigrants from all around the world had tried to flee from pogrom and discrimination. And that's before even, well, that's even before the First World War started. And this was the times when the Jews coming from diaspora from every corner of the world, all coming with their own background, and people of all walks of life, architects, designers, artists, scientists, philosophers, writers, and engineers, I don't know, traders, well, anyone, people of all walks of life. And they came with different backgrounds. There was only one thing that brought them together. That's their Jewishness. And that's their desire to live in the state where they would be welcomed. Yet they didn't know what was becoming. They didn't know of the First World War. They didn't know of the Second World War and the Holocaust, but they knew they wanted something different. So when the doors opened, the so-called doors, and the Ottomans allowed the purchase of the lands, be it Christians or Jews or whoever, so they started doing that. And this is when a lot of things had to be discussed, such as, okay, so we established the city, but what is going to look like? Or we all speak different languages. Which language are we going to speak? Is it going to be the Hebrew, the language of the scripture? Is it going to be Yiddish, the language of the Ashkenazi Jews, the Eastern European Jews, or Ladino, the language of the Sephardic Jews, and or what would it be? Or maybe just French, or maybe just German. So there were a lot of questions, and we're talking about the times when the state of Israel was really, well, far from even just being. It was just a dream, a very distant dream. Could you please turn the AC on? Getting stuffy, the AC on. Thank you so much. And this kind of, it was more like a settlement. So we are talking about, let's say, 1900, right? In 1900, it was just a settlement, the Yeshuv. The city of Tel Aviv would be established like 11 years later, and the state of Israel only in 1948. You can do this basic math. And nobody knew what it's going to look like. And this is when people, on the one hand, had this freedom to create whatever they wanted to and contribute to the development of their future land as much as they could. On the one hand, on the other hand, these people had to coexist together with very different backgrounds. And because of that, Tel Aviv looks very diverse. There is one neighborhood next to another, and they look completely different. And also, the older the neighborhood is, the more curious architecture going to be. Tel Aviv, in general, is an eclectic city. And if we're talking about the times even before Tel Aviv as a city was established, then we're going to be talking about a little bit of Art Deco, a little bit of Art Nouveau, some neoclassicism, but not in the European way. Yes, well, a lot of Jews that came, so they came from Europe, and they were architects, designers, and they would build the way they were told, they were taught to be to building. But it would always have this different twist because everyone was looking for some national character. Everyone was trying to build this new identity and to give it some distinct features. So we're going to visit the house of a person who tried to help build this new identity, well, the Jewish identity, but in the new place where all other Jewish identities could also coexist and where everyone else could be functioning normally, developing, enriching each other, and educating each other. So we are visiting the house of Chaim Bialik. This particular house, however, is well, it is referred to as the Middle Eastern Art Nouveau or Art Deco. That's I would say very eclectic building, but clearly has the features of the styles that I have just mentioned. And when we're inside, you're going to see it, and when we're outside, you're going to see it. So the Chaim Nachman Bialik, I will be sharing bits of his biography. This is the photo from Wikipedia because, well, there's so much growth now, so there's not really much of the house that you can see. By the way, the house has been quite recently restored. It underwent really massive restoration. And just look at that. So when the house was built, the palm trees were really tiny, and you could see the entire house. So you can tell, you can see a little bit of this, the arched windows, very Ottoman style. Then you see the tower and you see the dome. It's also a little bit of the Ottoman features, but also some windows and this asymmetrical shapes and different, very diverse geometry. That's clearly hello from Art Nouveau. And when we're inside, you're going to see many other elements of these styles that I've been mentioning. This is the famous building in Haifa of Madetech. Well, the Haifa University now, it's an old building of the Haifa University, and it's now the Science History Museum, which Grisha liked immensely. Or, well, Barwell worked a lot in Haifa because he worked, well, it's important to remember that it was the time of the British well, in 1917, it would be the time when the British Mandate of Palestine would start and would last up until 1947. And Barwell, when the mandate started, would work closely with the British because he was a European, and it was easier for the British to, coordinate things with him. And he worked predominantly in Haifa, but in some areas as well, combining the Ottoman features and European features, which I think looks really lovely. This is the building in Tel Aviv. It wasn't exclusively Haifa. This is the office of the Society for Preservation of enlisted buildings in Israel. Bayerwald was a good friend of Chaim Bialik because big part of Bialik's life actually was in Germany. He spent about a decade in Germany, where he immigrated after the revolution in the Russian Empire. And this is where he met a lot of outstanding German Jews. And so he asked Bayerwald to design the house for him. And Bialik only moved to this house and moved to the Holy Land in 1924. We will talk more about it, but let's talk about his biography first. So the Zhytomyr, he was he was born and lived obviously in the Pale of Settlement. And in many resources, you can see that Chaim Bialik was a Russian-born Jew. But whenever you see this in reference with um, well, let's say Russian Empire, right? It's not really Russia proper. Most likely it's about the territories of Ukraine or Poland, which were included in the territory of the Russian Empire. So Zhytomyr, the town in modern day Ukraine, and obviously he lived in the Pale of Settlement, the Mistechko called Radi. But Zhytomyr is a lovely city, old with a lovely architecture, but it's mostly the rural area where he lived, where Bialik lived. A big family, uh, quite poor family, very religious, and his father passed away when he was um, he was less than 10 years old, and his mother sent him to his uncle, and his uncle was this is the one of the well, it's the house where the family lived in Zhytomyr. And his uncle was a very well, it's not abusive is not the word, but it was a highly religious family, very Orthodox family. And his uncle was a very strong man, very serious, and never showed any affection to the boy. And obviously, strict discipline was a must. And Bialik, however, asked his uncle if he could go and study in a prestigious yeshiva, the religious school for boys in Poland, and the Volinitz yeshiva, Volinitz yeshiva, and the uncle said yes. He even gave him the money. The uncle had, he was a well-to-do merchant, and he sponsored Bialik's trip to Poland. However, quite quickly, Bialik realized that the religious life and, studying in yeshiva meant automatically the future, career of a rabbi or a person that would tie his life with religion and studies of Torah and, you know, Judaism. And he didn't want that. So he left the yeshiva, and for some time he even had to hide it from his uncle. And at that point, he also got introduced to like-minded young people. At that point, this term Zionism, which is a very, very bad word, right? So at this point, this term wasn't coined yet, but soon it would be. So, well, once again, I'm going to say it that Zionism actually, it was just a term that was originated due to very simple reasons. Jews were not feeling safe in the diaspora anymore because of the pogroms, because of the limitations and restrictions and oppression, and they were looking for better life. And the better life, they knew that it was pretty much the same everywhere Jews were, so they were looking for some other place. And at that time, very conveniently, in the end of the 19th century, the Ottoman Empire opened its doors, and you know the story. So the aspirations of the Jews to move to the ancestral homeland on absolutely legal conditions by purchasing the land from the Ottomans, well, that seemed like a really legit thing, and it was. So, and this is when, at a very early age, in his teens, Bialik became this, kind of a visionary of the creation of the future Jewish state, or at least not the creation of the state, but it wasn't really about the political. It was just about a place where Jews would feel safe and be as a nation. That was the idea. So, his uncle for a long time for several months, the uncle had no idea that the boy dropped out. Well, he left. He wasn't really kicked out, but he left. He just could not couldn't go on the same way. And then in Poland, Bialik also met a lot of other like-minded people, talented, bright, and also at that time he started um, writing poems. And very soon we are going to familiarize ourselves with one of his first published works, and all of that kind of came simultaneously. This love of literature. He was always drawn to reading literature, and he was given quite a good education anyway. And he was fluent in three languages: in Russian, in Ukrainian, in German further on, and French, and Hebrew, of course. And he knew Hebrew very well because it was the language of the scripture. But at that point, he struggled. He wanted to write poems in Hebrew, but that wasn't that easy because it's an ancient language. It lacked a lot of words that, were in the modern life, but didn't exist at the times when Hebrew was used, like 3,000 years ago, right? So that was a challenge, but this would become the work of his life. It would become the project of his life to make Hebrew a modern language and the language that all the Jews, no matter where they came from, would be using. And of course, there were a lot of opponents to that as well. For me, as a linguist, it's an important thing. It's an interesting phenomenon how an ancient sort of, not the dead language, but not used in the modern day life, right? How it was even possible to bring it back to life. And it was. That's an interesting phenomenon. We are inside the house. And, I think it's kind of really, it's coming, right? The understanding of the style, the design, the decoration. Look at all these tiles, the color coordination. These are the colors that are original to how it was when Bialik moved in the 1920s. We are in the blue living room, and remember I told you that approximately at that time he started his first experiments in writing, and further on, a bit later on, he published his very first poem, To a Little Bird. It's a pretty long poem. I'm just sharing with you the poetic translation by ChatGPT into English. It was written in Hebrew. He later on translated it as well, but it was meant to be in Hebrew because it was the language. It was this kind of the first poem where he expressed his aspirations to move to Zion, so to speak, right? The Zion is, Israel, right? The ancestral homeland of Jews. And we see here a lot of mentions of the sites in the land of Israel, and obviously the presence of Lord and addressing to Lord. So this became his manifesto, and it brought him fame. It brought him respect of the very big community. First in Poland, and then later on he moved to Odessa. And in Poland, by the way, he met his wife, and then they moved to Odessa. And in Odessa, which was the center of the Jewish life of the entire Russian Empire, Odessa was a port city. And in the port cities, all the limitations and restrictions were, I would say, almost non-existent, because everyone was mainly into trade, and this is the place where the number of rich Jews in the Russian Empire was probably even higher than even bigger than in St. Petersburg, just because there were a lot more Jews than in St. Petersburg, which where still a lot of restrictions applied, because St. Petersburg was definitely out of the pale of settlement. I'm leaving also the poem itself, so you could look through. And as I said, it became this manifesto, and it brought it just drawn so many people to him. and he very quickly became the celebrity and also a spiritual leader of the soon-to-be, Zionist circles. But in in Israel, and let's say in the Yishuv, which even preceded the establishment of the Jewish state, right? So kind of the settlement. Um, Chaim Bialik he wouldn't be known just as a poet and visionary, but he was everything. Bialik very quickly showed himself and just showed his talent in different kinds of literature, children's books. This, for example, the illustration of his children's book, and he is known also as a child's writer. So because he wrote a lot of children's stories. Also, he was a poet and a visionary and a philosopher. Also, he was, specialist, a really good specialist in the scripture. And he never got to finish the yeshiva, but he was well versed in everything with regards to Jewish laws and Jewish history. But he was also, as I said, the fighter for the revival of the Hebrew as the everyday language, as the modern language. And he would even become the president of the Ad Lashon, how do I translate it? Like the committee, the language committee. And this is so true. We know of several, let's say, linguists that worked tirelessly at the turn of the 20th century to design, let's say, the modern language. And there were some people that wanted the, let's say, Yiddish to become the language of the Jewish state. But there were also people who were against Yiddish because Yiddish was a discrimination, against other groups of Jews coming not from the Eastern Europe. So there were a lot of things, and that's why there was a need for the committee, and there was this really big battle between the two big groups, but eventually the Hebrew won. But I thought it would be a good idea to have a look at some of the contributions of Chaim Bialik in the Hebrew language, some of the words that he introduced and coined. He did not invent words. Let's say, there were multiple ways, words could be coined. But Bialik, because he had a lot of knowledge, great knowledge in Hebrew and the scripture, he preferred to use old roots and work with them, not just make up words, but use old roots. And he succeeded. All these words are used nowadays, and I actually know several. I know some of them. So it's good. They're good, legit. They are used. Now about the architecture. Look at these tiles. Even like each tile in this house has a meaning. What kind of meaning? Well, all these tiles were created at the beginning of the 20th century, and also all the artworks were created at the beginning of, almost all of them at the beginning of the 20th century, or maybe just the turn of the 20th century, and they were all created by by fellow Jews from Ukraine, from the former Russian Empire, and all of them were friends of Chaim Bialik. Many were friends from the Odessa times. Some were friends from Poland, from his Polish period or German period, because first it was Ukraine, then Poland, then Odessa, then Germany after the revolution, and only in 1924 he moved to the Holy Land. This is the painting by Shmuel Obadiahu, who actually was a Ukrainian Jew, and they were very good friends, starting ever since Bialik moved to Odessa. And Bialik, every artwork in this house is the artwork that was there from the very that has been here from the very beginning. And it would be only the artwork that were dear to him, the artworks by his friends, people that he respected, and it would all have to do either with the visions of the future state or with the memories of their stomping ground, or all sorts of these Jewish motives. And they were presents, of course, from friends. They were presents, and now they are a big part of the heritage, of course, because all these names are considered really big, Israeli artists, or let's say Jewish artists of Ukraine, or Jewish artists of Romania, Jewish artists of Poland, and that's just how things are. I'm a big fan of this fireplace. I'm a big fan of this beautiful color coordination, and I didn't expect to see this room so blue. Or, for example, this artwork. Let's pause here for a second. It's also by Shmuel Avadiyahu. Also, this is this is a rabbi by Reuben, who was a Romanian Jew, a prominent Jewish Romanian artist. He is well known in Romania. He's well known in the, let's say, Eastern European art world. And of course, he's one of the biggest Jewish artists as well. He mainly created artworks themed around Judaism, Jewish life. And also, they were all done in this slightly naive form. So speaking of the tiles, you must have seen a lot of them, and may actually be familiar to you. They may, ring a bell. So these tiles were created by the Bezalel School, and Bezalel School is the school of applied art that was created at the turn of the 20th century. And basically, this is the school that created a great deal of decorative elements, tiles, moldings, artworks, and all other forms of applied art that helped decorate, design the new homes in the new land. And a lot of it came into its own during the times when Art Nouveau was at its prime, and Art Deco, neoclassicism, and it all showed in what they created. But obviously, so Bezalel, the idea was to help shape the look, right? So the style, to find this style of the new state. But in here we see the style, okay, and also the Jewish motives. It's kind of both. It's still the Jewishness, but it's a modern vibe. And here we see a very important illustration. And by the way, the founder of Bezalel School was Boris Schatz. When I was in Israel, when I did some live walking tours, especially in this, let's say, old Tel Aviv areas, we found a lot of tiles and decorations, and this is one of them we saw on one of the buildings. So this is the Bezalel School ceramic tiles. So the tile, a lot of their tiles can be still found all around the country. And it's based in Jerusalem, in the Russian border, by the way. So the two men carrying the huge cluster of grapes is a very old. It's an ancient motif that comes from the Book of Numbers. It goes back to the story of 12 spies that were sent by Moses to explore Canaan, and then these people returned with the enormous bunch of grapes, which was meant to symbolize the abundance of the promised land. And it just couldn't. So the ancient motifs, the Jewish history, the parts of the Jewish identity would find this new representation, updated the contemporary representation in the modern life of the new state that was developing at a breakneck speed. Well, and obviously, and the other two men on the same mantelpiece decoration, let's just have a look. They are carrying the Ark of the Covenant, of course. Um, so the two very important Jewish elements in the decoration of a fireplace. Now, another rabbi, even though, well, okay, despite the fact that Chaim Bialik wasn't going to become a rabbi, it doesn't mean he didn't believe in God. It doesn't mean he denied God or anything. No, but she just didn't want to become a rabbi. He wanted to create, to have this creative freedom, and his talent worked equally great on children's literature, philosophical literature, his comments on religious literature, well, religious philosophy, and also love stories with some eroticism in it as well, and some fiction books and poems, and also his books on lexicography and linguistics, well, Hebrew linguistics. So he was just equally talented in all these things. So his wife, so as I said, they met in Poland and then they went to Odessa. Manya Everbuch in Odessa. Chaim Bialik worked for his father-in-law. That's also Manya in the later years already I think it's a photograph from German period, but I'm not too sure. But Chaim Bialik, however, just realized that the business wasn't really his strongest suit. And he further on, well, he continued obviously his literature work, but after, well, he realized that trade and business wasn't his strongest suit. He switched to, well, he opened his own publishing house and also started publishing and kept on publishing a lot of his own books. I'm a big fan of this artwork. It's giving me a lot of Art Nouveau vibes. That's the architect. Let me show you once again. There you go. So this artwork was painted way after the the house was built. So the Alexander Bayerwald was I made a mistake. So the house was built by Joseph Manor, but Joseph Manor, who was the architect of this house, he studied and worked closely with Alexander Bayerwald. And of course, Chaim Bialik knew Alexander Bayerwald as well. So I made a mistake. I even had it on the photo, but something happened and I just got carried away. So Joseph Menor was the architect, and he also is the author of this painting, the House of Bialik at Night. I love it very much. It's just magical. And you know what? That's exactly what it looked like. And there would always be the lights on because this house was full of people. The moment Bialik moved in, and it was 1924, he was already a big star, a big celebrity, known even outside of the Jewish community. And so when he moved in here, everyone knew about it. And even though, let's say, the traditional days for guests would be Mondays and Thursdays, you will see the great number of earthenware, porcelain, rock crystal. So in the cupboards, it's just a great number of these things because this house was Natalie. Thank you so much for the tips, and Dorley, if you're here, thank you so much as well. I didn't have a chance to thank you. Even though there were 2 days, actually guests would be coming every day on a daily basis, to the point that Chaim Bialik just didn't know, had no idea how to continue his literature work because there was just no time for it. He would. I just wanted to draw your attention to something. They have a little service window over there, so this is where all the food would be served to the room. It's really cute. I love it, and everything here is memorial. So all these items had been here during the times of Chaim Bialik. So and at some point, Chaim Bialik decided to move out. It was just the last year of his life in 1934. He moved to another town not far from here, Ramat Gan. But so this house was always full of people, and if the number of guests was too much, they could always add another table and open the doors to the terrace. So this is just their dining room, and all these items belong to the family. So you saw the porcelain, the great sets of porcelain and earthenware, and also the artworks. All of it were belong to the family. Chaim Glicksberg is another big artist of Israel. Also came from the Russian Empire, of course, and a big friend and a very frequent guest in the house. He's one of those people who could probably just be staying at 24. And and you know what? There was always enough food. There was always enough space for everyone. And they would be constantly talking, disputing, and eating and having fun. And I found this a quote from Marc Chagall about Bialik and the parties and the guests and how the get-togethers would go. So rarely have I seen among the Jews someone who ate as ardently as Bialik. The spoon, the fork, the knife, all this shaking in his hands, as though hypnotized, alternately entering and leaving his mouth. The clatter of plates echoed through stories told in his resonating voice, and in the meantime, he would attack another dish. And he just kept saying, Manichka to his wife, Manichka, could you please bring that? Manichka, it's so delicious, Manichka. And, all these things. It's just really cute. By the way, speaking of Manichka, Mania Overbuch, they were really in love, and they were a happy family. However, they never had children. They once tried to adopt a son of Mania's brother, but it didn't work out. And eventually, they adopted a boy, but it was just shortly after that Bialik passed away. So they never had children of their own, and it was just the two of them. But of course, there are other relatives and there are descendants of Bialik. For example, Mayim Bialik, the American actress, the star of the Big Bang Theory. She is the descendant of one of Chaim Bialik's siblings. I don't remember the exact relation, but she has the same last name, which I think speaks for itself. Some of the descendants of Chaim Bialik actually live in Russia. I know of at least several of them. I don't know anyone in person, of course. No, no, no. Just have you seen the beautiful red section, the beautiful red staircase that takes you to the private section of the house? So the usual way, how it worked everywhere else, the ground floor would be for official visits, the kind of gala part, and the upper floors would be just for family. And here, there used to be the bedrooms, and also the bedroom of his in-laws, whom he loved very much, and their bedroom, and also his study, the library, and it's now part of the museum. We don't really have the bedroom preserved. I will be just pointing out a few things here that I think are relevant. For example, over there is a collection of photographs of Abraham Cook, who was Rabbi Cook, the very first rabbi of, the very first rabbi of of Ottoman Palestine. Let's put it this way. And he was a good friend of Chaim Bialik, and never criticized him on not becoming a rabbi. And they knew each other from Europe from a long time ago. So Rav Kook, that's why his photos are here. So this tent is mostly giving us the stories of various relations and the friends that Chaim Bialik was that had. For example, there is a photograph with Yitzhak Ben Zvi, who was the second president of the state of Israel. They knew each other from the from the teenage. Yeah, from his teens. Yes, they knew each other, and then all of a sudden, his friend became the president. There were obviously a lot of caricatures. Some of them I found online. Some of them are there in the museum. A lot of caricatures, and yes, some of them about how he smoked, some of them about how he ate. Another photograph over here. This is a quite late period with Sholem Ash. Sholem Ash was let's say, one of those poets who supported the idea of Yiddish as the official language of the new Jewish state, which again was seen as discrimination as opposed to Ladino or any other language in the diaspora. So, but despite the strong beliefs, Chaim Bialik supported the Hebrew, and Shalom Ash supported Yiddish. They remained very good friends, and were always seen, arguing, but that never really changed anything between them as friends. So the Book of Legends, that's an interesting thing. The Sefer Haggadah, the Book of Legends, as I said, because he was well versed in Judaism, in religious studies, and the Jewish history, he decided to create this book of legends and different stories for kind of in a bit more simplified way, and collected it, and it made it in a more accessible way to general audience, because this was the times when a lot of people were not really religious. This was the time when Jews were just coming, for a better life, but not also because of the religious purposes, but just kind of using more, let's say, nationalistic approach, maybe just meaning well. And but Bialik still wanted people to know where they were coming from and to be aware of what a big part of their culture and their background. This book became a bestseller, and it was printed together with Yoshua Hana-Rovnitsky, a very close friend, and his business partner from the publishing business in Odessa, and then in Germany, and then in the Holy Land. And more caricatures. The library. Okay, so the library looks pretty much the same way as it looked during the times of Bialik. From what I understand, during this latest restoration, some of the items were changed to the way they originally looked at the beginning when Bialik just moved in. And but so it's I think it still counts. So here we have a lot of books the books from his library. He had quite a big collection: books in Hebrew, books in Yiddish, books in Russian, Ukrainian, in German and French and English. So he was a very educated man, and just had this flair for languages, and also books that he read, that also the book that he printed in their publishing house. Some more works that were presents from his friends. So by Leonard Bestanko and also Joseph Pinkas. You will see more of them. They were usually, so these artists, they were friends, and they were mostly dealing with this search of the new Jewish identity, but still the preservation of the Jewish identity, not just um, those were just the graphic works. Sometimes they were just sketches, and they were present. And these are a lot of old books, lots of dictionaries. He did a lot of, let's say, lexicography work. Well, because he was the member, and at some point he was even the president of this um, language committee. So he did really good research work in lexicography, because not only do you need to coin a word, design a word, you also need to make sure everybody understands it and starts using it. And then, so this is when also student literature comes in really handy. Another artwork by famous Israeli artists. Let's say one of them was Isaac Frankel. Isaac Frankel, by the way, is well known outside of Israel. He had a lot of personal exhibitions in the States, in Europe. His artworks could be found in multiple galleries, and also were sold at the auctions. And this just him. He was a very frequent guest in the house of Bialik, of course. Of course. Okay. This one is interesting. It actually has a signature. So Yosef Butko, he created a lot of lithography works, and he also liked to create this sort of imaginary illustrations of, let's say, the different episodes of the Jewish history, his own vision of them. Or he liked to create this woodcuts. It's would be all about it would be all about the Jewish life anyway. So the sketch from the poem Zohar, and also Butko created a lot of this woodcuts uh, to illustrate lots of the Jewish literature, and also some poems and some works that were published by Chaim Bialik, and that were published by his publishing house as well. So you could see that. And his study. This is probably I don't know, it's either this room, it's either his study or the blue living room. I don't know. Uh, I love the furniture here a lot. In the blue room, I like the tiles. Here, I like the furniture. I like the sofa. I like the desk. I absolutely love it, and I just love this huge balcony. And I only wish, I only wish I could the door to the balcony was open, but no, it was not. So his study was always full of people, and he sometimes had to lock himself in his study for hours, and not even talking, and definitely not showing his nose outside, because he knew he would never be able to get back into his study after that. That's his wife Manya. I don't know the name of the artist, however, so no idea. Many fellow writers, that's by the way Leo Tolstoy. I mean, it's Leo Tolstoy depicted there, but I don't know the author of the work. Many would refer to him as the prisoner of his own house, because that's exactly what it was. He couldn't no to people. It would be friends, people seeking for his advice. That's, by the way, the illustration of his study. Uh, and I think it looks very accurate. Maybe just the dimensions are a little different, but with regard to the contents, very much the same. And also here in this showcase, we see the books that were printed under his guidance, and another connection with the Bethlehem school. The son of Boris Schatz So Bezalel Schatz, the son of the founder of Bezalel School, did a lot of illustrations for the books that were published by Chaim Bialik. And so in this showcase, there are the books that were published under the supervision of Chaim Bialik. And this room used to be that room there were two bedrooms, the bedrooms of Chaim Bialik and his wife, and also the bedroom of his in-laws. They were, by the way, in a very good relationships with the in-laws. And when his father-in-law passed away, Chaim Bialik was inconsolable, and Manya Overbach mentioned it to someone that it was harder on him than on her to lose his father-in-law. These are the translations of Chaim Bialik's books in different languages, and also books printed during his lifetime. And so, speaking of the children's books, so Chaim Bialik especially got interested in children's literature in the later years of his life, let's say the last years of his life. But he experimented with it before, but for some reason he was more inspired to create children's books in the later years of his life. And when he left for Ramat Gan, he thought that this was it. He was completely out of energy and was out of inspiration. But for some reason, when he had this peace and quiet and no guests coming on a daily basis, he just all of a sudden felt this, the surge of inspiration, and started just creating children's literature just one more time. And it gave him probably just one more year of life, because I guess it just kept him going. And why there was so much importance given to children's literature? Because this is when the language is acquired, right? This is when you start speaking the language, and speaking correctly, grammatically. Well, it had to be done from the very beginning. And here in this window, we see personal belongings of Manya and Chaim. A lot of her hats, a lot of like different items, toiletries, makeup, purses, some clothing, some hats, all these things, just things that were just left in the house. So this part is not really memorial, because, well, there's no bedroom, there are no beds that survived. I don't know if they just disappeared or they're not on display. That I can't tell you. But the Beit Bialik is also a research facility. It's also a cultural center. And I think these are just really beautiful things here. Some small books that belong to them, some stationery, just like it. They're photographed together. More glasses, some purses, some makeup maybe. I'm not even sure what it was. Yeah, and that's his head. And one more room. That's an empty room, but actually this this room is usually used for temporary exhibitions. I wasn't really, fan of the photographs there, so I didn't really film much, but I just wanted to film a little bit of the tiles on the floor. But what I absolutely loved is that beautiful, terrace. Not even a balcony, it's a terrace. I didn't get to see the balcony, unfortunately. And this is the place where any visitor could just have a seat and work. This is where Bialik himself worked when he, had a chance. I'm pretty sure that he regretted multiple times for, having letting people come to his house whenever they wanted, but he just couldn't stop it. And that place just had such beautiful lights. And it got a little bit too hot during the day, so I spent several hours in the house. It got too hot, but it's still just such a beautiful place to work in. And there is enough of, wind, but since it was August, it still was too hot. So I think this is basically it.